Well, hello again, YouTube. It's Petey, and today we're going to be taking a look at Fender Stratocaster wiring diagrams. I'm going to be talking about some of the more common modifications and some things to keep your eye out for, some things that hop out at me. The first thing that you may notice if you take apart your guitar and throw the pick guard down on your bench, well, there's commonly at least two types of five-way blade switches. The more traditional, made in America or the Mexican Stratocasters, will have a blade switch that resembles what we see here on our left, with the 1 through 4 on our left and 5 through 8 on our right. It's basically the same switch used on the imports and squires, only as we see here, this is our conversion chart. So if you needed to know what, let's say your modification was to put a jumper wire between pins 6 and 7, well, you'll know, okay, well, this is 6 and 7 on this switch. So if I run a jumper wire here on this guitar, it's going to be the same thing as running a jumper wire here on this guitar. Because I'll tell you why this is important. Most of the wiring diagrams that you'll find do not show the more modern or import style blade switch. They show the traditional. So it can be a little off-putting at first, but when you understand the layout, that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 1 through 8, the only thing that's left to the wind at that point is the orientation. And I've attempted to illustrate this with the pink hash mark lining up and the green hash mark lining up, meaning if you were going to install this, it would end up looking like this diagram, with our 1 being up top and our 8 being down south. If we throw this imaginary switch this way, we'll see it will be getting neck. We throw it this way, we'll be getting bridge. Well, that's also about how it sits in the guitar. So throwing the switch up in the north position towards the pink is going to activate your neck. I hope that makes sense. It sounds more confusing than it is. One of the more popular modifications for a Stratocaster, when you get it stock, you have a master volume which controls all of the pickups. We have what we will call tone 2. The middle volume control is a tone control that is solely responsible for toning the neck pickup. Tone 2 is solely responsible for our middle pickup, which leaves this little piggy goes wah, 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 all the way home with no tone control. And a lot of people really want to have tone control for their bridge pickup. So one way we can modify this, I suppose you could take this wire that's running between tone 2 and pin 7, unsolder it and connect it to pin 6. Or you could do what most people do, and that's just to run a jumper wire in between pins 6 and 7, which on our import, that's going to be 6 and 7 are going to be here. And what this will accomplish will be, now our tone control 2 is going to be toning both of these two pickups. If you were to run this green wire, disconnect it from post 7 and connect it to post 6, I believe the effect that modification would have would be tone 2 would affect your bridge pickup, and there would not be any tone control for your middle. So it's up to you how you do that. I recommend merely tying together pins 6 and 7, which is the same thing here. And that way your tone control 2 here will be affecting the bottom 2 pickups, and Bob's your uncle. Now, one of the other extremely popular modifications is something called a treble bleed. And in this instance, I'm showing you this image that comes directly from Fender. So when Fender does a treble bleed, it comes as an option on one of their higher end American standard guitars. This is how they choose to do it. I'm not saying this is right, this is good, this is better. As a matter of fact, what they say is you're supposed to run some wires and have those sneakily coming out of your pickguard, reassemble the guitar with these wires sticking out, and then you can solder in your own stuff and experiment and come up with what really works for you. Now, you may very not ever come into a circumstance where you would need a treble bleed. Let me firstly explain exactly what it is. On the standard Strat, like how they come stock, whether it's American, whether it's Mexican, whether it's a Squier, they all come the same way. And they do not have any treble bleed circuitry installed. So the effect of this is when you're lowering your volume, like if you're a guitar player that keeps their volume on 10, you don't need to concern yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you find yourself turning your volume down, one thing you'll notice, especially when you get the further away from 10 that you get, meaning if you're turning it all the way down to 3, you're going to notice this more. If you're playing clean through a really loud and excellent frequency response amp, you're really going to notice this. As the further away you get from 10, the more the effect of not only a loss of overall volume, but tone. So your volume control is also killing tone. And some people don't notice this or it doesn't bother them. Some people think that makes sense for it to lose a little tone as it's losing volume. Other people cannot stand it. So it depends on your rig, it depends on your playing style and your ear. Some people say once you go with a treble bleed circuit, you'll never go without one. And it's fairly simple. There's different ways of doing it. This is a series parallel design. This is a more complicated design. Usually it's just it'll just have the one resistor and the capacitor. This 20K is not in place. The reason I'm including the more complicated one is because this is the Fender stock one. This is the one I built tonight. This is the one I'm going to be trying out, and I had this handy. So the long and the short of it is a 1200 PF capacitor is the same thing as a 0.001 microfarad. And this is a more popular way to measure capacitance is in microfarads. So these are two different ways of describing the same component. And the more popular method is this here. So if you're going to have to buy a component, you're going to want a 1200 picofarad, which is the same thing as a 0.001 microfarad. And it really doesn't matter. Some people will say you have to have an orange drop. Some people will say in the picture they're showing a ceramic capacitor. You may have a harder time finding it in a certain type of capacitor, like a we didn't have it in. I like to use metal film box caps a lot, like WEMA. But this is a real small amount of capacitance. You wire in 150 ohm in parallel with the cap, and then there's a 20K resistor. And what you'll do is you'll put heat shrink tubing on here on the legs. I put heat shrink on the legs, and then I put a large piece of heat shrink over the rest of it, because you don't want it shorting out on the back of the capacitor where it solders in. So this is our master volume control. That's where this goes. I would call this leg 1, 2, and 3. Like on these here, you'll see that 2 of them are inverted. The way that I look at this, when I chart this out, I will number all these 1, 2, 3, and I number them 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I just keep them straight. I realize that some of them are inverted. Like if you really take a look at this diagram, you'll notice something, and that's that we have yellow black, and black yellow, and that's because the middle pickup on a strat is out of phase with the other 2 pickups. That way, when you run it in the 2 and 4 positions on the switch, you're getting a combination of 2 single coil pickups, but one of them is out of phase with the other, and that gives us phase cancellation. And that's humbucking. That means if you have it on position 1, 3, and 5, you'll notice background noise. And you have it on position 2 and 4, you'll notice that background noise goes away. And that's because you're combining 2 different coils and they're out of phase with each other. It's the same concept like the Grateful Dead when they had 2 little capacitor microphone or condenser microphones out of phase for their wall of sound. They were able to put the PA behind the microphones, and they didn't get any feedback. And that was Stanley Owlsley who thought of that. He was probably higher than a kite on some orange sunshine acid when he realized that. But here in this diagram here, it's a little different the way that they're showing it. It's like they have a yellow wire to stand out from these 2, but they're not flip-flopped. So again, I don't understand why in this one diagram they show the phase reversal, and this one they kind of don't. But it is important. And I think they kind of build that into the pickups these days, so we don't have to think about it so much. But it's a fact of life that it does need to have the correct phase for it to function properly. So we talked about the difference between the 5-way switches. We talked about doing a tone 2 for our bridge pickup tone mod. There is the setup that I'm going to be trying is using a push-pull. It'll probably be in this position here, and I'm gonna wire it up like this. So when you pull, it discontinues the volume and It bypasses the volume and tone. So this is called a blower, okay? And supposedly bypassing this stuff, I'm not sure of how this is wired up. It looks to me like this is only going to work on the bridge pickup, the way that it's wired. Like the input for this switch, it's the bridge main. So it's like your bridge pickup is going to go through here and go right out to the jack. Or it's going to send it through the normal place it was supposed to go. Which is through this stuff. So in this instance, I don't think that the bypass is going to do anything with these two pickups, but when you pull this out, because see, I'm not, the way that they're showing this right now here is a separate DP/DT toggle switch. I'm not having it separate. That toggle is going to be built into this tone control. So when I pull that, it's going to give me a little bit of a boost. But really, to be honest with you, the reason I'm installing that is because on certain songs, I find myself accidentally turning the tone control down. And it happens like every time I play these songs. It's something about the way I'm playing. I'm getting sloppy and I'm bumping the volume control. So when I find that to be a problem, I can pull this tone out and Bob's your uncle. I won't have to worry about it. Once I've purchased this, I could go ahead and do things like have two different capacitors on the tone circuit. Like, okay, in this diagram here, they're showing here's the tone cap, and then it jumps down to here through this wire. What you can do if you eliminate this wire, you can have one tone cap for your neck pickup and another tone cap for your bottom two, which I think I'm going to do that. I think what I'm going to do is put a much higher value capacitor in my neck so I can do a woman tone. Which is this thing when if you let's say you have a normal guitar that's not modified, if you roll the tone all the way down with a dirt box on, you get this, and you go on the neck pickup, you get this real pleasing tone. If you up the value of that capacitor, what it'll do, it'll just cut into the remove more of the treble and some of the upper mids. So it's a more pronounced woman tone effect. And that's something that's really useful for, it'll actually shift the resonant peak of the pickup down. So ultimately, I think this would be one of those situations where I would want to run the external wires and experiment with a capacitor value until I come up with something where it really gets honky sounding, where I'm lowering the resonant peak of that pickup down into the mid-range sound. See if that's possible. Because having a lower value capacitor is really good for a functional tone control, of having it be functional all throughout its complete throw. The higher the value capacitor, the more it's going to cut into the frequency range of the guitar. So I don't like higher value caps. There was a time where I thought that was a good idea. I really don't think it is. And I know that there was a guy, a Telecaster guy, who had a lower value capacitor, and he would turn his tone control and it sounded like a wah-wah pedal. So that's what I want to have down here. Roy Buchanan. I need to get the Roy Buchanan capacitor. And like I said, that would be, you do not there's this wire here. Eliminate this wire here. And then you would have to have another a capacitor like this is connected here. I think in this case it would go off the middle lug, and the secondary wire would solder to the body. Is how you do that. Let's see. Our first diagram had that built into it, didn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So on this diagram we have, this is going to pin 1. You would disconnect this wire here. This wire coming off of 7 would go to pot 3 lug 2, and then your like 0.010 or 0.015 is what I'm going to use, is going to go in here. So that's probably how I'm going to wire how my guitar is going to be ended up wiring up. I'm going to let you guys go because I need to condense this information so I don't forget it. So it's kind of me figuring stuff out as I went along as well. If you need any of these diagrams and you can't find them, or if you're having any questions, I can help you out. It's just that more likely I don't like communicating through the comment section on YouTube. So if you want to have a back and forth with me, you'll have to email me. And you can find my email address. It's listed on YouTube. Anyway, you guys, take care of yourselves. Try to keep yourselves warm, and hug your pets is the most important thing that I always like to say before I say peace.